These are the headlines we're following at this hour. Following the leaders' summit between Russia and North Korea, America's CBS News reports Pyongyang has begun transferring artillery to Russia for its war in Ukraine. As Japan begins releasing the second batch of Fukushima wastewater, the South Korean government addressed this issue at the International Maritime Organization, once again stressing that the release meets international standards. Ahead of the 28th UN Climate Change Conference, the energy minister of the host nation, the UAE, speaks to Arirang News about South Korea and the UAE's cooperation on achieving net zero through nuclear energy and clean hydrogen. Good afternoon. Following speculation over an arms deal between Russia and North Korea after the summit between their leaders, America's CBS News reports that Pyongyang has begun transferring artillery to Russia for its war in Ukraine, though no details were given in terms of the nature or conditions of the deal. Our Kim Jong-sil has the details.
North Korea is reportedly providing Russia with weapons. According to CBS News on Thursday, a U.S. official told the American news channel that the move bolsters Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces some 20 months into their invasion of Ukraine. CBS called the North Korean support a possible culmination of the summit last month in Moscow when Kim Jong-un made a rare train trip to meet Putin in person. Putin implied after the summit that he and Kim had discussed military cooperation, and CBS said to at least some degree the cooperation appeared to be taking shape this week. The news outlet, however, added that it's unclear whether the artillery transfer is part of a new long-term supply chain or a more limited consignment. It is also unclear what North Korea is getting in return for the weapons. Meanwhile, the White House has strongly condemned Russia for Thursday's attack on civilians in eastern Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said it's horrifying if you go to grocery stores with your kids, an explosion happens and bodies are everywhere.
This is, again, what the president keeps talking about over and over again. We have to continue to support the people of Ukraine because this is the horrifying nature that they live in every day.
The press secretary added that President Biden will give a major speech on continuing to support Ukraine, possibly without going through Congress. The announcement comes as U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's removal from his role makes it challenging for Congress to debate over future U.S. support for Ukraine. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Russia's Vladimir Putin says Moscow has successfully tested a nuclear-powered global-range missile. Putin also warns of possible resuming nuclear tests that it has not conducted for the past 3 decades. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin announced Thursday that Moscow has successfully carried out a test of a new generation of nuclear-powered cruise missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Nuclear-powered missiles have virtually unlimited range. According to Russia's state news agency RIA Novosti, citing President Putin, the successful test of the Burevestnik, a global-range cruise missile with a nuclear installation, a nuclear propulsion system, was conducted. In an appearance at the Valdai Forum in Sochi, the Russian leader spoke to analysts and journalists and announced that Russia had also almost completed work on its Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile system, which would also mark another key element of its new generation of nuclear weapons. While Russia has not conducted a nuclear weapons test in over 3 decades, Putin has not ruled out the possibility it could resume such testing. He stressed that the U.S. had signed but not ratified the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, despite the fact that Russia had both signed and ratified it. Based on that, Putin said it would be possible for the Russian parliament to revoke its ratification, allowing for a nuclear weapons test. Putin also reminded the world of Russia's nuclear might, warning that any country that decides to use nuclear weapons against Russia would see the launching of hundreds of missiles in response, giving the enemy little chance of survival. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The White House is reportedly getting started on plans for a meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping in California next month. Citing an unnamed administration official, the Washington Post reported Thursday that the possibility of a meeting was pretty firm and that they are beginning the planning process. The meeting will follow other high-level engagements between the two countries in recent months. 4 senior U.S. officials have traveled to Beijing recently, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi plans to visit Washington in the coming weeks. Biden and Xi last met in November last year in Bali on the sidelines of the G20 summit, where they emphasized the importance of face-to-face diplomacy and expressed hopes of getting the two countries' relations back on track. As Japan begins releasing the second batch of Fukushima wastewater, the South Korean government addressed this issue at the International Maritime Organization, once again stressing that the release meets international standards. Meanwhile, other nations such as China and Russia were more critical. Our Lee Soo-jin tells more.
International opinion remains divided over the Fukushima wastewater discharge. South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries said during a meeting at the International Maritime Organization on Thursday that the first discharge of treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant met international standards. During the meeting to discuss the London Convention and Protocol, which prohibits the dumping at sea of certain hazardous materials, South Korea emphasized that the international community must continue working together to ensure that the Fukushima discharge does not affect marine life. It also requested the continued sharing of data with transparency. Other nations, however, were more critical of Japan. The representative from China lambasted the discharge and referred to it as a selfish and irresponsible act, calling for in-depth discussions on whether it falls under what the London Convention and the Protocol sees as the dumping of hazardous materials. The Russian representative also said that Moscow views the discharge as a violation of the Convention and the Protocol. The U.S. representative, however, strongly supported Japan, urging the other nations to rely on science and not to spread false information. The U.S. representative also added that discussions regarding the discharge should be held at the International Atomic Energy Agency, not at the IMO. While Japan continued to reiterate its stance that the discharge complies with the Convention's regulations on marine dumping, no clear consensus was reached during the session. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
In the latest signs of improvement in their bilateral relationship, South Korea and Japan held vice-ministerial talks for the first time in 9 years, with North Korea's provocations topping the agenda. Our Choi Min-jung has the details.
South Korea and Japan held vice-ministerial talks on Thursday in Seoul as a follow-up to a historic leaders summit held in March. Seoul's first Vice Foreign Minister Chang Ho-jin and his Japanese counterpart Masataka Okano met at South Korea's Foreign Ministry, where they held a strategic dialogue. Talks had been halted since 2014 due to deteriorating relations.
This strategic dialogue, which resumed for the first time in 9 years, involved in-depth discussions on a wide range of areas such as bilateral relations, as well as regional and global issues.
In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said that the two sides addressed North Korea issues, including the regime's recent meetup with Russia. The vice ministers also strongly condemned North Korea's continued nuclear and missile provocations. They reportedly agreed to a united response based on close cooperation with the United States. Chang and Okano said cooperation to improve North Korea's human rights issues should be further promoted next year, when Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo will simultaneously serve as members of the UN Security Council. The officials hope that the dialogue would be an opportunity to discuss ways to further advance Seoul-Tokyo relations. This comes as Okano said that South Korea and Japan are important neighboring countries that should cooperate as partners on bilateral relations and various international community tasks. The two sides also agreed to revitalize trilateral ties with China following last week's high-level meeting held between the 3 Asian countries. Okano also met with Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin in the afternoon, where Park emphasized the need for close cooperation. South Korea and Japan's soured relations have been improving after Seoul earlier this year came up with a solution to compensate the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor on its own. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The World Trade Organization has lowered its forecast for this year's global trade growth to 0.8% from 1.7% in April. The WTO released its latest forecast on Thursday, citing a global manufacturing slowdown, adding that global trade and output slowed abruptly in the fourth quarter of 2022 as the effects of persistent inflation and tighter monetary policies seen in major economies such as the U.S. and the EU bloc. It also pointed to war in Ukraine as casting a shadow on the outlook for trade. However, it has left projections for 2024 nearly unchanged at 3.3%. The WTO also expects real-world GDP to grow by 2.6% at market exchange rates in 2023 and by 2.5% next year. South Korea's foreign exchange reserves have fallen for the second month in a row on the back of the strengthening U.S. dollar. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country's foreign exchange reserves came to just over $414 billion U.S. dollars at the end of September, down by $4.18 billion compared to the month before. The agency attributed the drop to the U.S. dollar index rising by 3% against major currencies amid hawkish remarks from Fed officials signaling prolonged high interest rates in the United States. As of the end of August, South Korea's foreign exchange reserves were the 9th largest in the world. The latest data shows South Korea's inflation accelerated last month. Concerns rise as price pressures stretch out to other items and services, namely dairy products and transportation fares. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Starting in October, the Korea Dairy Committee raised the price of raw or unpasteurized milk by 88 Korean won or 8.8% to 1,084 won, which is about 80 US cents per liter. This is the steepest increase since 2013, when the country introduced a unique system for determining raw milk prices based on production costs rather than supply and demand to protect dairy farmers and facilitate better price negotiation.
Following the increase in raw milk prices, South Korea's major dairy companies have raised their prices for a liter of milk by around 3 to 6%.
Consumers are expected to be hit hard by rising milk prices, with skyrocketing shopping cart prices already putting a dent in their wallets.
As I get older, I find myself drinking about a glass of milk a day, so I tend to choose buy one get one free deals.
Milk is not the only item affected by rising prices.
It seems like the prices of meat and seafood have really gone up. There were things that used to be relatively affordable in the past, but now rising prices made me hesitate to buy them.
In fact, global sugar prices have hit a 12-year high, hinting at increased processed food prices for the rest of this year. This is due to recent severe droughts and abnormal weather conditions, which have been affecting major sugar exporters, particularly India, the world's largest sugar-producing country. Following the tightened oil supply from the OPEC+, rising oil prices is another concerning factor. According to the Korean National Oil Corporation, as of Monday, the average price of gasoline at gas stations nationwide increased for 12 consecutive weeks. Starting this Saturday, subway fares in the capital region will be hiked for the first time in 8 years. One expert emphasized easing inflation expectations as a measure for the government to control overall inflation.
If everyone starts expecting prices to keep going up, it tends to trigger a continuous rise. So easing inflation expectations is crucial. That means the government needs to demonstrate its commitment to price stability, securing trust from the public regarding the matter.
Earlier this week, Seoul's top office said the Yoon Suk-yeol administration will focus on improving the cost of living and continue to manage price levels in the fourth quarter of this year. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's FA5 fighter jet achieved a record of 100,000 accident-free flight hours on Thursday. The Air Force on Friday said the milestone was achieved over a period of around 10 years. The FA5 took its first flight in 2013 and since then has flown some 55 million kilometers, equal to over 140 trips from the Earth to the Moon. Around 60 FA-50s are currently operating in South Korea. The Philippines has been operating the fighter jet since 2015, and Poland, plans to receive a total of 48 FA5s by 2028. This year's Nobel Prize in Literature went to Norwegian author Jon Fosse. The Swedish Academy in Stockholm praised his innovative plays and said he gave voice to the unsayable. Fosse is one of the most widely performed playwrights in the world and was awarded the biggest prize in global theater, the Ibsen Award, back in 2010. The remaining Nobel Prizes to be announced are those in peace and economic sciences, that is, due on Friday and next Monday, respectively. Ahead of the 28th UN Climate Change Conference, the energy minister of the host nation, the UAE, speaks to Arirang News about South Korea and the UAE cooperation on achieving net zero through nuclear energy and clean hydrogen. Our Park Gon-woo sat down with the UAE's Minister of Energy and Infrastructure.
The United Arab Emirates is on its way to achieving net zero carbon emissions and sees South Korea as a potential partner to be able to do so. UAE's Minister of Energy and Infrastructure explained how.
UAE have announced that it's tripling its capacity, renewable energy capacity, together with the nuclear capacity that we have built together with Korea. We believe that UAE will have a clean energy contribution of up to 30% by the year 2030 and 38% by the year 2035. And that's put us on track to achieve net zero by 2050.
He also added UAE plans to produce and globally export hydrogen, especially clean hydrogen, possibly to Korea.
We will be hopefully producing 1.4 million tons of hydrogen, and maybe we will be exporting some of that to Korea one day. So we look forward to collaborate with the whole world during COP to ensure that everyone is doing his part to achieve sustainability.
As the host of COP28, which starts at the end of November, the UAE aims to unite the world on climate change.
What we promised to bring together is the largest COP ever. It's going to have to be diversified. Every voice will be heard.
The minister also commented on the current oil prices and how OPEC Plus tries to deal with them.
We are trying to balance the supply and demand, and the price is a result. Sometimes it's not up to us to decide the price.
While saying underinvestment is a bigger problem, he ended by saying UAE will expand its oil production capacity in the future.
We would require an investment in the level of $500 billion every year to replace what we lose and to bring more resources to meet the growth in demand. And we are raising our production capacity to the level of 5 million barrels by the year 2027 instead of 2030, just to ensure that our customers in Korea and in the East are getting the resources they require in the medium to long term.
Meanwhile, the Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference, one of the largest events specializing in the oil and gas industries, ended Thursday under the theme of decarbonizing faster together. Speakers, including ministers and the CEOs of major oil firms, gathered to discuss ways to phase out fossil fuels. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Now at the Asian Games in Hangzhou, the South Korean women's hockey team has advanced to the gold medal match after beating Japan. Team Korea also picked up its 2 bronze medals in weightlifting and wrestling. Our Matthew Ashley has the details.
We begin with hockey, where South Korea's women's team has advanced to the gold medal match after beating Japan 4-3 in a semi-final penalty shootout. South Korea were leading Thursday's match by 2 goals at the end of the third quarter, before 2 late goals by Japan took the match to a shootout. The South Korean team will now be looking to secure their 6th gold in the event when they come up against China in the final on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Korea time. Moving on to weightlifting, South Korea bagged a bronze medal in the women's 76-kilogram class. Weightlifter Kim Soo-hyun took 3rd place after lifting a combined total of 243 kilograms, with 105 kilograms in snatch and 138 kilograms in clean and jerk. She finished just 1 kilogram ahead of Chen Wen-hui of Chinese Taipei, after judges ruled that a contested lift by Kim was valid. Both gold and silver were won by Song-gu Kyang and Jong Chun-hee of North Korea. The bronze marks South Korea's 2nd medal in weightlifting at this year's Asiad. And finally, South Korea added its 2nd wrestling medal of this year's Games with a bronze in the men's Greco-Roman 130-kilogram division. The medal was won by 30-year-old Kim Min-sok, who beat Indian opponent Naveen Malik 5-1 on Thursday. The match saw Naveen take the lead with his first and only point in the first half before Kim came back to score 5 points following the interval. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It felt nothing like early October this morning. We almost needed a cozy sweater for our morning commute. And not surprisingly, Daegalyeong saw the season's first frost and ice this morning. But afternoon highs are rising fast into the 20s, so do expect a dramatic temperature gap between lows and highs today and do dress accordingly. It's always better to dress a bit warmer when we are heading into the colder month. Afternoon highs are 2 to 3 degrees higher this afternoon under a fair amount of sunshine nationwide. Seoul and Daegu see highs of 22 degrees Celsius, Gyeongju topping out at 24 degrees. And those in the southern parts of the country will notice more clouds moving in this afternoon. Then there will be light rain through Sunday, but the rest of the country will enjoy fine autumn weather under mostly cloudy skies with more seasonal temperatures for this upcoming 3-day weekend. Then next week looks to be sunny and dry. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
A big match is coming up this Saturday, the final match for the South Korean men's football team at the Asian Games, who are seeking to log the country's 3rd consecutive gold in the sport. And Team Korea is facing the same rivals as in the 2018 final, making this rematch all the more thrilling. Well, Japan has proven to be strong, winning all 5 games so far. But the Daegu Warriors and coach Hwang Sun-ho are staying confident as they inch closer to a gold medal, which is a title that will also grant many of the young male players exemptions from the mandatory military service, including Paris Saint-Germain's Lee Gang-in. Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min also got his exemption with the gold medal 5 years ago. This is where we end today's newscast. Thanks for watching.